All right, everyone, get ready, because today we're diving deep into something that I know keeps a lot of online business owners up at night.
Chargebacks.
Chargebacks, yeah, those little things that can really make or break your bottom line. And we're going hyper-specific today. We're talking about card-not-present situations.
Right, CNP transactions?
Exactly, CNP transactions. And, we're going to be dissecting a newsletter that is all about helping businesses like yours navigate this very tricky and often confusing world of chargeback protection.
It can be confusing.
Yeah, and we're going to go beyond, just the surface level here.
Absolutely.
We're going to try to uncover some surprising facts and some practical strategies that you can use to protect yourself and protect your revenue.
Definitely. And we should start with just like the basics. Like, why are CNP chargebacks so challenging?
Yeah, I mean, imagine this. You ship an order, right? Everything seems fine, and then bam, you get hit with a chargeback. The customer claims they never received the product, or even worse, they say their card was stolen. What do you do?
Yeah, that's the nightmare scenario for so many business owners. And I think the core of the problem is that with CNP transactions, you don't have that physical card swipe. You don't have a signature. So there's this inherent lack of physical evidence, and that really shifts the burden of proof onto the merchant.
Right, so it's not as simple as just saying, hey, but they placed the order. Like, you need to be able to actually prove it.
Exactly. And to make matters worse, back in 2015, the liability for fraudulent CNP transactions shifted significantly to merchants. Unless you're using 3D secure authentication, which we'll get to later, you're often held responsible for proving that the transaction was actually legitimate.
Wow. Okay, so the odds are kind of stacked against us here.
A little bit.
But that's why we're doing this deep dive, right? Because this newsletter claims to have some secrets, some strategies for winning these chargeback battles. So what's the first line of defense?
Evidence.
Evidence.
Having a rock-solid evidence package is absolutely crucial.
Okay, so we're talking receipts, emails, anything we can get our hands on.
Yeah, but it's not just about gathering every scrap of digital paper you can find. It's about being strategic. The newsletter highlights several key pieces of evidence that really carry weight in these disputes.
Like what?
Well, one of the most important is IP address data. This is so crucial because it links the purchase to the customer's device.
So they can't really deny that they were the ones who placed the order.
Exactly. It makes it much harder for them to say, oh, it wasn't me.
It's that gotcha moment, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so we got the IP address. What else can we do?
So another important thing, especially when you're dealing with a higher value item, is to look at AVS and CVV matches.
Okay, remind me what those are again?
So those are the fields you fill out when you make a purchase online, the billing address and the security code on the back of your card.
Okay, I've typed those in a million times.
Exactly, and those tiny little details can be your saving grace because matching AVS and CVV records prove that the buyer actually had access to the sensitive card details. It adds another really strong layer of proof that the purchase was legitimate.
So it's not just showing that they clicked the button, it's showing that they actually had the means and the knowledge to make that purchase.
Right.
Okay, so we've got IP address, we've got payment details. Let's say the customer still says, nope, wasn't me. What do we do then?
Detailed transaction receipts are absolutely essential. And you want to keep records of everything, the date, the time of the purchase, the amount, the specific items purchased, any discounts, applied the whole 9 yards.
Okay, so we're painting a very clear picture.
Exactly.
Okay, but what if they say they never even received the order?
This is where good old-fashioned customer communication comes in. Emails, order confirmations, even chat logs, anything that shows the customer acknowledged the purchase or agreed to terms and conditions or interacted with your business in any way that demonstrates awareness of the order, that's incredibly valuable.
So we're connecting the dots, right? We're showing a timeline of actions and communications.
Exactly. And, when it comes to physical products, one of the most common reasons for chargebacks is...
Item not received, I'm guessing.
You got it. And that's why using tracked shipping methods is absolutely essential.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense for the customer, too. Like, they want to know where their package is.
It creates a better customer experience, and it gives you that indisputable proof of delivery.
So it's not just about winning the dispute, it's about preventing it in the first place.
Exactly. And there's another element that a lot of people overlook, and that's your terms of service.
Terms of service.
Yeah, I know those legal documents can seem overwhelming, but they can be incredibly helpful in a chargeback dispute.
Really, I always just kind of skim over those and click accept.
I know it's tempting, but clear, well-defined terms of service, particularly those related to returns, refunds, and disputes, can really strengthen your position.
So it's not just a legal formality, it's actually something we can use as evidence.
Exactly. If you can prove that the customer agreed to your terms, which outline your policies on chargebacks, it shows they were aware of the rules of the game.
Okay, so we've got our digital paper trail, we've got our tracked shipping, we've got our trusty terms of service. Anything else we should be thinking about in terms of evidence before we move on to actually preventing chargebacks?
Well, there's one more piece that can be really helpful, especially when you're dealing with digital products or services, and that's tracking how the customer interacts with your offerings.
What do you mean?
So think about things like when they access support articles or when they contact your team or if they download resources. You want to be logging that kind of activity.
So even if they say they never use the service, we can actually point to specific instances where they were engaged with our platform.
Precisely. It builds a much more compelling narrative. It shows that the customer was active and involved, and it makes their claim of non-use much harder to defend.
Okay, that's a really good tip. I think a lot of people don't even realize they can track that kind of stuff. So we've talked a lot about gathering evidence for the fight, but how do we avoid the fight altogether?
Let's dive into some proactive protection strategies, and the newsletter we're analyzing has some great advice on this front. One of the most powerful tools you can implement is 3D secure authentication.
Okay, 3D secure. I've seen that little logo pop up when I'm checking out online, but I've never really understood what it does.
It's basically an extra layer of security that verifies the cardholder's identity. It usually involves a password or a one-time code that gets sent to their phone.
So it's like a double check to make sure the person using the card is actually the cardholder.
Exactly. And here's the best part with 3D. Secure the liability for fraudulent transactions shifts back to the issuing bank.
Oh, wow.
So if a chargeback does come through and the transaction was authenticated with 3D, secure the bank is responsible for absorbing that loss, not you.
Okay, that sounds like a pretty big deal, especially for businesses dealing with high-value transactions. That peace of mind must be priceless. But what about those situations where 3D Secure isn't an option? What other proactive steps can we take?
There are a bunch of other really effective strategies you can implement. One is making sure you're using address verification service and card verification value checks.
Wait, aren't those the same details we were talking about earlier for building our evidence package?
They are. It's like a 2-for-1 deal. These little details not only serve as really strong evidence, if a dispute occurs, they can help you prevent those disputes from happening in the first place.
So by checking the billing address and the security code, we're basically flagging potentially suspicious orders before they even go through.
Exactly. If the information provided by the customer doesn't match up with what the bank has on file, it's a huge red flag. And then you can take steps to verify the order further or even decline it altogether if it seems too risky.
So it's about being proactive and stopping those fraudulent transactions in their tracks.
Exactly.
Okay, what else can we do to stay ahead of the game?
Another one that's super simple but very effective is using clear billing descriptors. You want to make sure that your business name is easily recognizable on the customer's bank statement.
You know, I've been there. You're scrolling through your statement and you see a charge. You don't recognize instant panic.
Exactly. And that confusion can lead to accidental chargebacks. So by making sure your billing descriptor is clear and consistent, you're minimizing the chance that a customer disputes a charge simply because they don't remember making it or they don't recognize the name.
It's all about transparency and making the experience as smooth as possible for your customers. Speaking of which, let's revisit delivery tracking. We talked about how crucial it is for winning a dispute. But it also plays a big role in prevention, right?
Absolutely. Providing tracking information not only keeps the customer informed, but it also reduces the likelihood of item not received chargebacks because when they can see exactly where their package is and when it's expected to arrive, they're much less likely to jump to conclusions and file a dispute.
Right. It's all about managing those expectations. Now, the newsletter also mentions something called Chargeback Alert Services. What are those all about?
These services act as an early warning system. They connect directly with card networks, and they notify you of potential disputes almost immediately, often before a chargeback is even officially filed.
Wow, so it's like a heads up, a chance to address the issue before it escalates.
Exactly. It gives you that valuable time to investigate the situation, to gather your evidence, and even potentially reach out to the customer to resolve the issue directly. In some cases, you might be able to offer a refund or a solution that satisfies the customer and prevents them from going through with the chargeback.
These alert services sound like a game changer, especially for businesses that are processing a high volume of transactions. It's like having an extra set of eyes on your business, constantly scanning for potential threats. But even with all these proactive measures in place, there's still a chance that we could face a chargeback, right?
That's true. No system is foolproof. But by implementing these strategies, you're significantly reducing your risk and you're putting yourself in the best possible position to defend your business if a dispute does arise.
So we've talked about building a strong evidence package and taking these preventative measures. Is there anything else we can do to kind of go above and beyond in creating a truly chargeback-resistant business?
There are a few more powerful strategies we can explore. Let's dive into those right after a quick break. Yeah, there are a few more things we can do to really bulletproof our businesses.
Okay, I like it bulletproof. I'm ready.
So first up, training your team. This is huge. Anyone involved in processing payments needs to be on the same page when it comes to understanding the risks of chargebacks and following those verification procedures we talked about.
Yeah, I mean, it's like even with the best systems in place, if you've got one person who's not following the rules, it can really mess things up.
Exactly. It's like having the strongest armor in the world, but if one of the links in your chainmail is weak, the whole system is vulnerable.
I like that analogy. So we got our team trained up. What else can we do?
Another important strategy is to establish clear risk thresholds. So this means setting specific policies for additional verification on transactions that just seem a little bit off.
So like those orders that raise red flags, maybe it's a really high value purchase or an unusual shipping address, something that just makes you go, something's not quite right here.
Exactly. And by setting these thresholds, you're creating a system that automatically flags those risky transactions for closer scrutiny. You might require additional verification, like actually calling the customer to confirm the order.
Yeah.
Or you might set a lower threshold for requiring 3D secure authentication.
It's like having that extra layer of security, a safety net that catches those potentially problematic orders before they slip through the cracks.
Right.
Okay, but what happens if, despite all our precautions, a chargeback does come our way? Is it always worth fighting it tooth and nail?
That's a great question, and it's where things get a little bit counterintuitive. Sometimes the best strategy is actually to issue a preemptive refund.
Wait a minute, so instead of gathering all of our evidence and fighting it out, we just give the money back?
It might seem crazy, but hear me out. Chargebacks come with fees. They can negatively impact your merchant account, standing not to mention the time and energy involved in fighting them. Sometimes cutting your losses early can actually be the smarter move.
So it's about kind of weighing the cost of the battle against the potential reward. If the evidence is a little shaky or the customer is particularly difficult, it might be better to retreat and live to fight another day.
Exactly. And, for businesses that are processing a high volume of transactions, especially those in industries that are really prone to chargebacks, there's another option they can consider.
Okay, tell me more. I want to know all the secrets.
Professional chargeback management services.
Oh, I've heard of those.
These companies specialize in handling disputes, and they have these expert teams who know all the ins and outs of the process.
So they're like our chargeback ninjas going in and fighting on our behalf and dealing with all the complexities of the system?
That's a great way to put it. They can analyze your processes, identify vulnerabilities, craft really compelling evidence packages, and represent you in disputes. Some of these services boast win rates of like 70% or higher, which is way better than the average merchant can achieve on their own.
That's impressive, 70%.
Yeah.
Wow, so for businesses dealing with a lot of chargebacks, these services sound like they could be a real game changer, but I imagine they come at a cost.
They do, but for a lot of businesses, the return on investment can be significant. They're saving you time, they're reducing stress, and they're potentially recovering revenue that you might have lost otherwise.
So it's about weighing that cost of the service against the potential benefits and the peace of mind it provides. We've covered a lot of ground today, everything from understanding how CNP chargebacks work, to building that solid evidence package, to putting those proactive prevention strategies in place, and even exploring these professional chargeback management services. What's the one key takeaway you want our listeners to walk away with today?
I think the biggest thing is just remembering that knowledge is power. The more you understand about chargebacks, the better equipped you'll be to protect your business.
Absolutely. It's not about being afraid of chargebacks. It's about being informed, being proactive, having those strategies in place to minimize your risk. We've given you a lot to think about today, but you don't have to do everything at once. Just start by identifying, what are your biggest vulnerabilities and focus on strengthening those areas first.
And don't be afraid to ask for help. There are resources available, whether it's talking to an expert or looking into those chargeback alert services we talked about, or even considering those professional management services if you need that extra support.
Exactly. And to all of our amazing listeners out there, we want to hear from you. What are your biggest challenges when it comes to preventing chargebacks? What strategies have you found to be the most effective? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's keep this conversation going.
We're all in this together. And, by sharing our knowledge and our experiences, we can help each other build stronger, more resilient businesses.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Until next time, everyone, stay informed, stay proactive, and keep those profits safe.
All right, so we're talking about going beyond the basics here, really bulletproofing your business against chargebacks.
Okay, yeah. Give me those pro tips.
So one of the most important things you can do is train your team. Anyone involved in processing payments needs to be completely up to speed on the risks of chargebacks. And they need to be following those verification procedures we talked about. Like, it's got to be clockwork.
Yeah, makes total sense.
Yeah.
I mean, even with the best systems in the world,
Yeah.
Human error can always sneak in. So making sure everybody is well-trained and on the same page is huge.
Think of it like this. You can have the strongest armor in the world, but if there's one weak link in your chainmail, the whole system is vulnerable.
Right. Okay, so we've got our team trained up. What else can we do?
Another really smart strategy is to set clear risk thresholds. So this means having specific policies in place for additional verification on transactions that just seem a little bit fishy.
So we're talking about those orders that kind of raise red flags. Maybe it's a really high-value purchase or a weird shipping address or something else that just makes you go, hold on a second, is this legit?
Exactly. And by setting these thresholds, you're basically creating a system that automatically flags those risky transactions for closer scrutiny. So maybe you require additional verification, like actually calling the customer to confirm the order, or maybe you set a lower threshold for requiring 3D secure authentication.
It's like having an extra layer of security, like a safety net that catches those potentially problematic orders before they slip through the cracks.
Precisely.
Okay, so we've got our team trained up, we've got our risk thresholds in place, but let's be real, sometimes, despite our best efforts, a chargeback is going to come our way. So is it always worth fighting it tooth and nail?
That's a great question, and this is where things can get a little bit tricky, because sometimes the best strategy is to actually issue a preemptive refund.
Wait a minute, so you're saying instead of gathering all of our evidence and fighting it out, we just give the money back?
I know it sounds counterintuitive, but think about it. Chargebacks come with fees. They can hurt your standing with your merchant account. Not to mention all the time and energy you have to put into fighting them. Sometimes cutting your losses early can actually be the smarter move.
So it's kind of like weighing the cost of the battle against the potential reward. If the evidence is kind of weak or the customer seems like they're going to be a real headache, it might be better to just walk away and live to fight another day.
Exactly. And, for businesses that are dealing with a high volume of transactions, especially those in industries that are really prone to chargebacks, like, certain types of online retail, there's another option to consider.
Okay, I'm all ears. What's this secret weapon?
Professional chargeback management services.
I've heard of those.
These companies, they specialize in handling disputes. They've got these expert teams who know the ins and outs of the chargeback process like the back of their hand.
So they're like our chargeback ninjas going in there, fighting on our behalf and dealing with all the complexities of the system.
That's a great way to put it. They can analyze your processes, identify vulnerabilities, build those really strong evidence packages, and they'll even represent you in disputes. Some of these services have win rates of like 70% or higher, which is significantly better than what the average merchant can do on their own.
Wow, 70%. That's pretty impressive. So for businesses that are dealing with a lot of chargebacks, these services sound like they could be a real game changer, but I'm guessing they probably don't come cheap.
They don't, but for a lot of businesses, the return on investment can be huge.
Yeah.
You're saving time, you're reducing stress, and potentially recovering a lot of revenue that you might have otherwise lost.
Right. So it's about weighing the cost of the service against the peace of mind and the potential benefits it can provide. So we've covered a ton of ground today, everything from the nitty-gritty details of how CNP chargebacks work to building a strong evidence package to those proactive prevention strategies and even these professional chargeback management services. What's the one key takeaway you really want our listeners to walk away with today?
I think the most important thing is just to remember knowledge is power. The more you understand about chargebacks, the better equipped you're going to be to protect yourself and protect your business.
It's not about living in fear of chargebacks. It's about being informed and proactive and having those strategies in place so you can minimize your risk. And we've given you a lot to digest today, but you don't have to implement all of this stuff at once. Just start by thinking about, what are your biggest vulnerabilities and focus on strengthening those areas first.
And don't be afraid to reach out for help. There are so many resources available, whether it's talking to an expert or exploring some of those chargeback alert services we discussed, or even considering those professional management services if you need that extra level of support.
Absolutely. And to all of our amazing listeners out there, We want to hear from you. What are your biggest challenges when it comes to chargebacks? What strategies have worked best for you? Share your insights in the comments below, and let's keep this conversation going.
We're all in this together, and by sharing our knowledge and our experiences, we can help each other build those stronger, more resilient businesses.
Well said. And on that note, that's a wrap for today's deep dive. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.